Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Atlantic Tales, when we'll visit the Flying Boat and Maritime Museum at Foynes in County Limerick that tells the story of the birth of Shannon Airport. In the 1930s, the Irish government began to explore the potential of transatlantic air travel. Minister for Industry and Commerce Sean Lamass assigned the task of investigating possible sites for an airport to the Department of Defence under Frank Aiken. Around this time, long-range flying boats were being tested, and the concept of a land plane capable of crossing the Atlantic was still being explored. Several locations on the west coast were identified, and one at Rineanna in County Clare was selected. However, preparing the site to facilitate aircraft would take some time. In the interim, it was decided that the flying boats would operate through Foynes on the other side of the Shannon estuary. While the day of the flying boats is long behind us, the fascinating story continues to be told. The Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum tells the story of the journey from the first flying boats at Foynes Airport, or Shannon Airport Foynes as it was known, to the new airfield at Rineanna, later to become Shannon Airport. Margaret O'Shaughnessy is director of the Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum. She grew up in Foynes and had a family connection with the flying boats.
I had a grandfather called Milo McMahon, who was a local small farmer, and when flying boats and all that began here, he was taken on as an employee of BOAC, and his job was, as a horseman, to go out on horseback to call in the crews if they were needed, outside of normal times, or if flights were delayed or came early, whatever. And as a child, I suppose, he would often be telling stories about airways, which I hadn't an idea what airways were. So that's the first thing. And I suppose the second thing, I came back here and got married in 75. I had worked with Bank of Ireland in Dublin and came back home. And there was a group being put together for community council, to form a community council and do a new community centre, because after the Stardust, all the old halls were being, closed down. And I went with my mother to that. Now, there were very few young people in Foynes at that time. I was one of only 2 women to get involved, with 30 of us all together, and we set up a community council and we started fundraising, and Dick Haslam was the county manager. Paddy Hillary came, good Clareman, president, and officially opened it. And Dick Haslam said, now this is done, what are you going to do next? I got into fundraising and PR and that during all the years we were doing that. And I said, sure, I suppose the only other thing we're famous for is flying boats. We better do a museum of some kind. Now, Pat, I'd say I hadn't been inside the door of 2 museums at that stage in my life. And he said, drop me a note and we'll see. And that was 1987. And I did. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, very supportive. And he put a committee together. There was a tourism committee at the time under the council. And we had a meeting. And a few thought it was a great idea and a few thought I was a lunatic. But anyway, from that, we got, I think it was £1,000 feasibility study. And I was very lucky. I got 2 people from Killaloo involved. Brian Cullen, who was a pilot, and PJ McGoldrick, who was a pilot and went on to was the CEO of Ryanair. And we thought, where will we go? And Tony Ryan came into the picture at GPA, and they went to Tony, and Tony said he'd give us £50,000. 1988, that was a nice heap of money to get going, and we'd go for grants off Shannon Development. Jack Daly was the chair of Shannon Development at the time, and we said, where will we put it? And we said this was the original building, we'd have to try and come back here. And this building, a lot of it was mostly derelict. The port company had offices at the front. This building has gone through an amazing history. 1860 built Monteagle Arms Hotel, then an Irish residential college, and then idling. It had years of. So we got 3 outhouses, 3 stables, kind of mud floors, and said, what can you do with it? I contacted Maureen O'Hara. That was, I suppose, the big thing for me. Pan Am were still flying into Shannon. The Pan Am manager there gave me her number in 02763 in Glengarriff. It took me a while, and I rang one night, and she answered. And I said, is that Maureen? Yes, who's this? I said, my name, and I'm from Foynes. And once I said I was from Foynes, I was in. She loved Foynes because of her husband, Charlie Blair. Charlie Blair adored the village of Foynes. And
because he flew in here?
He flew in here and took the last one out here and all of that history. And that was her. She said he always spoke about Foynes. I'll help you. She didn't help financially, but she helped with promotion and all of, abroad.
Her name alone?
Her name alone. And then we did a year, and we got a great guy from Galway, Jack Harrison, who was a heritage interpreter. He's still working with me. And we got the 3 rooms up. We had nothing, Pat. He created the stories for us after doing research. We'd no memorabilia, we'd nothing. And we decided to go with it, and we opened it on the 8th of July 1989. And we asked Maureen, will you cut the ribbon and be the patron? And Margaret Hector, the American ambassador, was here as well. And about maybe 100, 200 former workers from BOAC and more particularly from Pan Am, and Pan Am, the company, all arrived here. And we had a wonderful day. And that was the 8th of July 1989.
International aviation between Ireland and the US started here on the River Shannon in Foynes.
Yeah, Lindbergh chose here. Lindbergh was sent by Pan American to survey, and he looked at Cork, Galway, and he didn't pick Foynes. He picked across the river where Rineanna later was, but they weren't ready in time. But in 1936, the Irish Times announced that Foynes was going to be the temporary base. Now, if you were driving into Shannon Airport today, there's a big mud pond just at the back of the hotel, and that was where the flying boat base was to be, and that's where they started work. But it took too long, and they were ready to start the flights in 37, and Shannon Rineanna wasn't ready, so they picked a temporary location, came across the river, and they picked here for several reasons. We were on the estuary, we had a sheltered harbour, we had a train service, and all the major oil companies, Shell and Esso and all them, were based here. They were importing their oil through the port, so they were factors that came in our favour. 36, and then by 37 the trial flights were beginning, and that was just 2 airlines, BOAC, well, they were called Imperial Airways at that time, and Pan American. We later went on that we had American Export as well. And from there, 37 trial flights, 38 was the extraordinary piggyback trial, which was one plane on top of the other. This is the only place in the world that ever flew from, and flew from here to Canada and to New York. And the idea was that they'd refuel a flight in the air to give it the distance. So Foynes was Ireland's first international airport and was called Shannon Airport Foynes. And there's terrible confusion. When we finished, our last flight was October 45, and the first one into Shannon was October the following few days, and that was Charlie Blair. And they were called Rineanna, and were so for until the 50s, and then they changed their name from Rineanna to Shannon International Airport. So we have a great history between us and Shannon Airport. But there is confusion sometimes with the Irish coffee story and all that. It began in Shannon, it did, but to a Shannon Airport here. And we have all the menus and everything here that show you Shannon International Restaurant Foynes. You know, it's where Brendan O'Regan began, where everything started. Met service began here. They sent over 3 men from England to set up our Met service. Radio communications were here, and there was another piece of equipment on Foynes Island, and Ballygreen, of course. So first air mails were here. So the history here is just unreal. I presume the Second World War hastened the development of aircraft. That's definite. And because of that, they got to the land planes much earlier than anyone expected, But of course, the jets and all that at the time was wonderful for Shannon, because, it was from here that the agreement was signed between Canada, America, England and Ireland that all flights must stop at the Shannon Airport. That was here, and that transferred over. So that's why for years Shannon had the stopover, as we all know.
The famous Shannon stopover ended in the 90s.
Yeah, I remember marching to try and hold it, We're very proud of our Shannon Airport today, and we love to work with them, and they're very supportive, and we think it's the best airport, of course it is, in the whole of the country, and we're hoping it's going to go for bigger and greater things going forward.
But you love telling people it all started
Well,
here.
we like to just correct the history. I was watching television one night, it was RT, and they were doing a documentary on Dublin Airport, and here they were saying this was the first transatlantic. It wasn't. I felt like throwing something at the screen and saying, who did did their research, because it's there if they do. We have all the original records. We've all the hand-done weather maps from that time. They used to do 3 weather maps a day, and they were hand-done. We have them all. They were all saved. When things were getting knocked about in today's Shannon, we went over and rescued them and brought them back, and we have them here. So we're very proud of the history. We're very proud of the Shannon today as well.
When you started, you didn't have memorabilia. You had to start somewhere, get your few bits and pieces, and you've come a long, long way. What did you start to get first?
The first few things we got, I took off on a research mission like a lunatic on my own. And I went to Newfoundland, arrived in 10 foot of snow, and I went on down to New York. And there was a man called Chris Quinlivan, who's great connections in Clare, and they're still there. And Chris put me up, and with no money, Pat. I went out and I was researching and finding one. You see, one name would give me another name. You know, I remember meeting Kathleen Clare, and Kathleen Clare was One Trip secretary. She gave me all the books out of his office. You know, we have a library as well. And when we opened, I remember Zadalis and Jim, they came and they brought me the pencil sharpener off the Yankee Clipper, and somebody else brought me menus, and just someone would tell someone, and it just went on like that. And even only this week we got stuff. And we have the grandson of an American expert pilot coming in next week, because he said his grandfather stayed in the Dunraven Arms. You know, so there was nowhere for the stuff to go. We were the only flying boat museum in the world at the time. There wasn't one. There was loads of fantastic aviation museums, you know, but not dealing with that period. So we have a most amazing archive. I got into military intelligence, you know. We gathered stuff from everywhere. And now we're looking to try and see, can we get someone to sponsor a full-time archivist for us? Because people have come from Australia to look up records here. You know, there's nostalgia, there's history. And the period of time was when Ireland was a young country, and we were very busy with all this here. And then the war meant that we were neutral, and that gave us this whole Casablanca feeling, if you know what I mean. That all these famous, John F. Kennedy, you know, Eleanor Roosevelt, Hemingway, all of these came through here because they couldn't fly from America to Europe without coming here. You know, the big debate is, and we've no evidence, no proof, all the locals said Churchill was here, but we've nothing that shows it.
So you went from a situation, Margaret, where you had no memorabilia to a point where you had no place to store the memorabilia you actually secured.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there was a long story to it. We had started with the 3 rooms, and then we managed to get, I'd say, maybe 2 more rooms. And I think everybody thought, sure, look, give it 6 months, a year, and she'll be gone. But gradually we negotiated with the port company. And I'll always remember Sheila de Valera was a minister at the time, good Clare connections, and she helped us. And I remember when Clinton was playing golf in Ballybunion, we invited Clinton here, of course. We loved the American connection. And Bertie Ahern came here while he was waiting for Clinton, because Bertie never played golf. And I said to him, listen, we need space. So all the pressures were coming on behind us. And eventually in 2002, we managed to purchase the building from the port company, the whole lot.
And this, as you say, is the original building.
Absolutely.
And it's so important that you have that, and the air traffic control tower, which people probably still don't appreciate the significance of that. Yeah,
and I think people don't appreciate the actual history here at times, you know. So we're all kind of, you know, history is so important, Pat. And the way I look at it is, I set this up as a charitable organisation and a not-for-profit company. So all my directors serve voluntary. You know, I'm retired, but I'm back voluntary. Everything, anything. If we make 5,000 or 6,000 profit or 10,000 profit, we do something again. So we've developed you know, we've huge mortgages as well. Don't think it's all, you don't get grants without putting up your own money. But like, without Tony Ryan's original 50, we were going nowhere. It cost us 400,000 at the time to get ready and get it open. And that was a great start. After getting the money from Tony Ryan, Shannon Development would have been the funding agents for this region. And I was so fortunate by meeting Jack Daly and giving him my story. He was supportive. But then he gave me a man called Jim Beery from Limerick. And Jim Beery was my backbone. He went everywhere. He fought every corner for me. He lived to see it open. But he died shortly after that. And, you know, people like that are forgotten. I have a plaque up to him. But the thing is that there was some great people in Shannon Development as well. to survive as a museum is almost impossible. And you can see that, around the country. We get great government support from the Department of Culture now, Communications and Sport, and we get an annual stipend. But it's not enough. We've 26 people working here. In the season, about 18 for the winter. We try to stay open all the time. So we had to look at what can we do that will supplement the tourism, because this year is going to be a bad one. It is, with the way the world is, it's not going to be a good tourism season. And that's just not me just saying that. So we thought, what could we do? So we thought, okay, we'll build a conference centre. It's a whole new museum, as you can see. But we said, when we're doing the cinema, we'll make it 100-seater, right? And we'll use it as a cinema in the winter. So we have to look at all these ways of fundraising. And that's what we've done. So in 23, Leo Varadkar's theatre came down and opened our 5 million development, which was huge for us. This gave us the new museum, gave us a boardroom, gave us the conference centre, everything. And then we thought, that's the end of it now. But then we had this unusual Teflon roof, 2 big peaks over the main hall. And that started leaking. And we thought, we're in trouble again. So we had to go pleading, cap in hand, and all the rest of it. And they gave us a grant, and we took out another mortgage, and we got a bit of sponsorship. And look, lo and behold, as you see today, the contractors are pulling out tomorrow. They've done a new roof, new everything. So now we have a concert venue. You can't sit back, Pat. You just, the Shannon Aviation Museum will tell you the same in Shannon. The Hunt Museum, they'll all tell you that. Unfortunately, the rugby one didn't keep going. But it's the insurance, the energy costs, staff costs. You have to have them, and we don't mind paying them and we pay them well. But the thing is, with the new auto enrolment and the minimum wage going up and there's VAT, it's energy is a huge one. Insurance is, oh my God, insurance is crazy.
That first phone call to the great Maureen O'Hara in Glengariff, that developed into an amazing friendship. But what did you want from Maureen the first day?
I knew she was well known. I knew her husband, Charlie Blair, and that she might have material belonged to him. I'd suppose that if she'd decide to give us some of his stuff would be a start. So we had Charlie Blair with us from the beginning, nearly, because she did. And she was walking I still have the old video. She was walking the St. Patrick's Day Parade, not as Grand Marshal. She was actually pushing a policeman that had been shot in Central Park, McDonald's, and she was walking. A fella, I was in New York and somebody interviewed her at the end, on the big television, and she started telling everyone, come to Ireland in July, I'm opening this museum. So she had her birthday here every year, 17th of August, every year. And Brendan O'Regan, God be good to that wonderful man as well, he'd come as well. And that was fundraising for us. And once we had Maureen, we had the media, we had the photographers, we got the publicity. So we never actually paid, for promotional ads and things like that. We do now, but we had her for all those years, and she and I became very close friends. And, now we miss her so much when we come around to the 17th of August. I'll never forget being at her funeral and at her graveside. But I have to tell you about the day we got the Charlie Blair stuff. Maureen said to me, if you're taking all this now, she said, so much of it has to go hand luggage, because she said, I won't say what airline could lose it, right? And I said, fine. So I had this bag with parachute written in it, right? I had a pilot box, and I had all these masks and all this stuff. And I was going on the flight in JFK, and the way there's a fella usually at the end of the ramp kind of seeing you on, and he looked at me, and that time now it wasn't as strict about hand luggage. They were hanging everywhere off me, and he looked at me and he said, are you a nervous flyer, ma'am? And I said, I'm not too bad, and I can be, I'm not too bad. And he said, it's a long time since anyone got on board with their own oxygen and parachute. And I never forgot that. And she got a great kick out of that, So I've been with her for lots of her famous events where she got honours and awards. And, I suppose she was the first really great Irish movie star. And she didn't take any fuss from anyone, you know. She said it as it was. She was amazing. She used to have my staff here, and she'd have a brush, and she'd have their hands behind their backs and a brush going to show them how she was taught to walk properly. So, all of that. We used to have great fun, Pat. Great fun with her.
We'll hear more from Margaret O'Shaughnessy later. Coming up, we'll meet the operations manager at Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum, and later take a tour of the impressive facility.
For a few glorious years, Foynes was the centre of the aviation world. During the late 1930s and early 1940s, the quiet seaport was turned into a major international airbase, used by flying boats to link Europe with North and South America, with Africa and with Australia.
Welcome back to Atlantic Tales. Located on the Wild Atlantic Way and Shannon Estuary Way in Foynes, County Limerick, is the birthplace of Shannon Airport. It's also where one of the world's most famous drinks was invented, the Irish coffee. The Foynes Flying Boat Museum was established initially to tell the story of the pioneering days of aviation and passenger travel across the North Atlantic. In later years, another museum was developed to celebrate the rich maritime history of the River Shannon and the Port of Foynes. Barry O'Kelly is Operations Manager at Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum. He is also a qualified librarian and helps manage the museum's extensive collection when he can, but that in itself is a full-time job. The museum, as we see it today, has gone through several significant changes since it first opened.
The museum has developed massively over the last decade. There's been quite a substantial investment of €5 million in 2023, and this section of the museum that we're in now, in the Maritime Museum, was developed in 2011. So that reinstated the entire control tower building, which is fantastic to see. You can go right through the control tower into the Maritime Museum, up to the very top of the tower, and you can see where the flying boats actually landed back in the 1940s, which is fabulous. So you can see the Shannon Estuary, you can see Foynes Port, the beautiful island as well. So you have fabulous views from the very top of the control tower as well. And the odd time as well, during the summertime, we get some cruise ships coming to Foynes as well. So you can even see cruise ships docked at the port as well. And you can see the railway station being redeveloped as well at the moment. So in time that will open as well for cargo and hopefully for passenger service in years to come as well.
So the building, Barry, we're in here is the original Shannon Airport Foynes building, and up here is actually an air traffic control tower. We'll go for a look if we can.
Yeah,
so
no problem.
There's actually an air traffic control tower on the main street of Foynes in County Limerick.
And here we are going up this lovely spiral stairs up to the very top of the tower, and you have a beautiful panoramic view from the tower. As I say now, the weather isn't great here, but on a lovely day you get a beautiful view of all the vista from the west right over towards Limerick City. But right in front of you here then you have a lovely panel as well, what it was like back in the 1940s you can see here on your left, and then what it is like here today as well. So it shows the flying boats being docked at the harbour right beside Foynes Island as well. And you have the Celtic cross as well, that was used by the navigators on the flying boats, just flying right over the village. They'd always have a look at the Celtic cross before they'd land here at the harbour and before they taxi in to bring in their passengers on board. And you can see the new development as well on the other side of the museum as well, the more commercial side where the conference centre has been built. There's private car parking as well, because we have spaces to hold conferences up to maybe for 200 to 300 people, and our library and archive is also on that side of the building as well.
You're a librarian, this is what you love. In terms of archives, you have to have information, you have to be able to get that information, get it before it is lost.
Thankfully, in the last development, we were able to develop a whole new archive. So part of the Museum Standards Programme of Ireland with the Heritage Council. So we're fully accredited with that as well. So we have a vast archive predominantly focusing on the aviation collection. So we have shipping registers that would have logged all the different types of vessels and flying boats that came to Foynes from the 1800s onwards. So if you're a researcher today, you can come in and visit the archive and you can look at the shipping registers and see what flying boats actually docked at Foynes during the 1940s. So we get a lot of genealogy requests with the passenger manifestos for people trying to track down, it could be their grandfather or grandmother, to see when they came to Foynes. So we can go back and trace the date of those aircraft landings and go back and look at the passenger manifestos and try to tie the story together. Even at times we've had refugees that would have fled war-torn Europe during the Second World War, Polish refugees and so on, many of them Jewish, and they would have come back here throughout the years as well. Not as regularly as they would have had years ago. We had one maybe 5 years ago. It's been a while since we had a special request like that. But they're the type of very interesting museum queries that we get to do with the archive. So that kind of showcases the importance of the collection.
Archiving all of that and keeping all of that, that must be a big job.
It is a massive job. I wish I had more time to do it, to be honest. My primary focus is on running the museum and managing the operational side. If you don't mind that into the house, the archive will work. There won't be any funding there to do that. So it's very important that we keep on top of our visitor numbers keep creating jobs, increasing visitor numbers and developing the museum. And I think we've done a great job in that in the last number of years.
It's so important that we're telling the story of what was once Shannon Airport Foynes, which was the birthplace of Shannon Airport. Are you still getting archive material presented to you? Do you still go looking for material that you can store here and tell the story more?
We are indeed. We get research queries every day. Even yesterday we had one come in from the US, again someone trying to trace their ancestry when one of their relations landed in Foynes and passed through. So again, now we'll go back and look at our archives, look at our files, but we're developing our archive continually, and we're trying to make it more accessible, and that's part of the next phase, we'll say, of developing the museum, that we want to make the collection more accessible to visitors as well. So we're working on that, and that's an important element of our history as well. We want to showcase as much as we can and get as many researchers into the archive as much as we can as well. We're always open to sponsorship. If anyone would like to come in and sponsor an archivist for a year, that's something that we're looking at the moment as well. But luckily, I have the expertise myself in-house as well, that I can help someone to come in and catalogue the collection as well, so, but it's definitely something that we need to focus on as well in the coming weeks.
But your main priority is the operation of the centre.
It is indeed,
so
yeah.
When people come here, then it's no longer just about the Flying Boat Museum, it's about Maritime. You've got the replica
Flying Boat, yeah.
Flying Boat as well, of course, and you have the conference centre, you have the cinema. There's so much more here.
There is. It's so much more than the museum. Obviously the museum is our primary focus, but we developed over time to be more commercial, and we needed to do that because West Limerick wouldn't be a hive of tourism compared to maybe Clare or West Clare. So we needed to find other ways to turn over our funding and make money, and that's why we had to focus on more commercial activities, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And of course the Maureen Horror connection with the Oscar and with our dresses brings a new dimension to the museum with the Quiet Man. Again, that attracts many more visitors from the US. And then we have the Irish coffee story, which is world renowned, and we're developing a whole new Irish coffee exhibition at the moment as well to tie in with that. And Margaret probably mentioned about the new conference centre as well, where we're going to host temporary exhibitions as well, downstairs and upstairs, again to bring more visitors to the museum in time to come as well.
Telling a story through different media is hugely important. Holograms, and I saw one in the reception area earlier, very realistic. It helps tell the story here in Foynes.
Yes, we need to have a nice mix in the museum. It can't all be about technology, so you have to have the right artefacts on display, the display panels to match those artefacts, and then have that mix that people have a bit of both. I don't like to go into a museum where it's all about technology. I like to go in and see the artefacts and read about them, but also technology as well, and interact with it, and touch screens and so on is very important as well. And we've had a brilliant Irish coffee hologram years ago. Many of your listeners might know of that as well, so we're trying to recreate that Irish coffee hologram in a new exhibition that we're working on at the moment as well, which will hopefully open in June.
The cruise ships, you also alluded to them earlier. Do visitors coming in on the cruise ships know of you, and are they coming here as well?
They do indeed. We get phone calls and emails before they visit Foynes to see if they can buy tickets. They cruise ships predominantly spend maybe 8 to 10 hours in Foynes, so they also go through the village and go to other businesses, but they also like to visit the museum, and at times you can have queues out the doors, out onto the car park for people waiting to get in on the days of the cruise ships, because it draws a lot of people locally as well in Limerick because they want to see the cruise ship, but then when they get to Foynes they also want to visit the museum. So it can be crazy busy days here, but ones that are really fantastic to see.
It's great to see them coming in, but that's a nice little niche.
It is, and we need that now because this is a very tough tourism season. We can see that with our coach numbers that they're down slightly this year, but thankfully we've managed to bring a lot more domestic visitors to the museum over the last number of years. 50% of our market share is now made up of the domestic market, which is unbelievable. Before COVID, that was the North American market. It's totally flipped since. So we're getting many visitors from Ireland now as well, so we're going to continue to work on that and to get as many Irish visitors to visit the museum this year as we can, due to all the things that are going on internationally.
You've done very well over the years to keep the product fresh and to further develop the product. Yeah. What else is in the pipeline? What else do you have planned?
Oh, we never stop thinking. We have a great festival on June 12th. It's a full weekend of festivities in Foynes. So we're going to have concerts here with Rowan McCarthy, of course, who is local and becoming very famous worldwide at the moment. We're also going to have a fashion show in Foynes as well on June 12th. And there's going to be a family fun day as well on the Sunday of that weekend as well. So that's the new type of events that we're constantly trying to think of to bring more people to Foynes.
What's the biggest attraction here?
Oh, definitely, it still is Irish coffee and the Boeing B314 Flying Boat. That's the jewel of our crown. But Irish coffees are getting really, really big now because people are beginning to associate Foynes as the home of Irish coffee, which it is.
No, that's all been clarified.
It's all been clarified by the late and great Brendan O'Regan, of course, one of the most famous chairmen. So we're always trying to, as much as we can, to keep Brendan's memory going through the restaurant and throughout the museum as well. We have a fabulous portrait in the restaurant of Brendan as well. So we're always trying to promote him as much as we can.
And the sculpture, the bust.
And the sculpture, of course, yeah. Of course. We'll launch that in the next couple of weeks.
Education, very important. You'd get a lot of school tours here?
We would indeed, yeah. Something again that we're trying to work on to get more school tours to visit the museum, especially kind of coming into the term, into May and June. You get a lot of school tours coming here, which we're delighted to see as well. And we also recently redeveloped the shop, so that's something that we always really wanted to do, but we're always afraid to do it because we were always focusing on developing the museum exhibitions. But the shop is a very important element from the commercial side of the business, and we put quite a bit of funding into the shop recently, and it turned out really well, and we're delighted with how it turned out. So we're hoping to see a bit of an upturn on turnover in the shop now, even though it's going to be a tough season.
Do you think that people are aware that Shannon Airport Foynes was the birthplace of what we know as Shannon Airport? Do they?
Not as much as they should, I'm afraid. We always do our best to get out there as much as we can, be it nationally and internationally, but people don't really associate Foynes as the first, we'll say, commercial airport in Ireland. But we're doing our best to get our message out there, and I'm sure we will. The way we developed the museum, people are beginning to realise now, if I say I work for the museum, they know about the museum years ago. They might have said, the Foynes Flying Boat Museum, where is that now? Now they know where it is. They say, oh, I've been there, it's fantastic. Oh, I must go. So it's one or the other. There's definitely a lot more recognition of the name and of the brand and the quality of the museum now since we developed it a couple of years ago.
Coming up, we'll take a stroll around Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum and hear later more about Maureen O'Hara and her connection with Foynes, which is very much kept alive here.
On July 8, 1939, Pan Am's Yankee Clipper, a Boeing 314 flying boat, landed in Foynes, completing the first passenger flight from the USA to Europe. It was the start of a short era when Foynes, it was said, was centre of the world, and as the pioneers of aviation drew the continents closer together, it was certainly one of Europe's most important airports.
Welcome back to Atlantic Tales. The Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum tells the story of the journey from the first flying boats at Foynes Airport, or Shannon Airport Foynes as it was known, to the new airfield at Rineanna, later to become Shannon Airport. The museum is also home to an impressive collection of memorabilia belonging to the late Hollywood star Maureen O'Hara, who had strong connections with aviation and Foynes. Rachel Rimmer is a tour guide at Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum and makes a point of being on hand to welcome every visitor.
So I would always greet our visitors at the reception, and whether it is a tour or whether it is a walk-in, I feel like it's so important to let everybody know what we have, because the museum has expanded so much over the last number of years. It's so important not to let people go blind through the museum, because they'll miss some of the most fantastic artefacts that we've picked up, or like even just here standing in the Maureen O'Hara exhibition. Why is she here? Why do we have a famous Hollywood superstar at the end of an aviation museum? She's here because of Captain Charles Blair and the fact that they were married and her love to keep his memory alive. She had donated a lot of Captain Blair's artefacts that we have down here, and later on through the years she became our patron, and following her passing in 2015 her family gifted us her belongings to allow this fantastic exhibition to be built. But I would always guide them into the cinema, show them the short little movie that shows the planes landing and taking off from the port of Foynes, and giving people more of an understanding as to the hows and whys these planes came to be. Also, initially when you walk through the reception, you'll see the different ports where the flying boats would have landed after they left the port of Foynes between the years 1937 to 1945. We also talk about the refugees that passed through Foynes during the Second World War, and we've been really fortunate in the past where some of the refugees themselves or their families have come back to us, and they've showed us their passports that were stamped Shannon Airport Foynes. And we also talk about the more affluent passengers, so the likes of a very young John F. Kennedy, Eleanor Roosevelt, Humphrey Bogart. I mean, names of this calibre coming through a small little village in West Limerick is absolutely spectacular.
It's a great story, and there are so many stories to tell here. The Maureen O'Hara exhibit, and I know this is only a fraction of what you actually have, this must be a big puller in terms of interest as well.
Absolutely, it's a tale of two sides, really, or a game of two sides. People come for aviation and then discover Maureen O'Hara, or people come for Maureen O'Hara and then discover aviation. What we have here belonging to Maureen is above and beyond anything anyone could dream of. And we're so very fortunate to have this fantastic exhibition. Even for myself, as an Irish person, I knew The Quiet Man, and that was about the only movie I ever knew. And then I walked into this exhibition and I saw that she had done 59 movies, a lot of which I had seen from my younger years. And just to have it all here in one room is absolutely spectacular. Just one day I had a visitor come through and she walked in here. This is not what she was expecting at all. And she walked in and the tears just rolled down her face because she was a massive fan of Maureen but didn't expect what she had actually found when she walked through the museum.
It has been so important that you keep the product here fresh. So it's not just aviation, it's now, of course, Maureen's connection with aviation through Charlie Blair, who came through here, and of course her own when she ran his airline when he passed away.
Antilles Airways.
To be the patron here and to visit here so often, there is so much here. I'm told I can't hold the Oscar. There is a replica. Is there a replica?
There is a replica Oscar, but you can't hold that either. That one is tied down, but this is it here. It's fantastic. I have been really fortunate where they were cleaning one day and they had lifted off the cover for the Oscar and I got to hold the Oscar. So I was very grateful for that. But yeah, you have all Maureen's television accolades as well just down here. I mean, there's so much, like even her clothes. When you look at her clothes, we call this area in here, we call it her wardrobe. When you look at the clothes, particularly from my aspect anyway, I would look at her clothes and go, they'd be worn today. Anyone that comes through here just thinks her fashion it's timeless, really. And we're so very fortunate as well. When you look at the outfits that she would have worn in the movies and how pristine they are and how pristine they were kept. Because, you know, like with other outfits and whatever, you might find mothballs or something like that. Here, they've stood the test of time. And like, we're very grateful for that.
So the family protected and minded everything belonging to
everything,
her. Is this the real Oscar?
This is the real Oscar.
This is the real Oscar.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd also like to say thank you to all my fans who have been so kind to me over the years and truly made this night possible. I'm so proud to receive this award because it comes from my peers who represent every element of the motion picture business. Believe me, the admiration is mutual.
This wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Margaret. She was such a fantastic go-getter, and because of her we have all of this. They had a fantastic friendship that spanned, I think, nearly 40 years. So like, credit to Margaret as well for that.
There's so much here. It's aviation, it's maritime, it's meteorological. The Met Service started here as well. Are people often surprised that
every single day I have people, and I do look after a lot of bus tours that come in, and they'll come in and go, oh God, another museum, and they walk out blown away. And I'm not just saying that, that's the truth of it. They're blown away by everything. Every turn you make in this museum, it's coming at you with something completely different. There's not a whole lot of museums in the world that can actually say that.
What kind of people then are coming here? I know Barry touched on the cruise ships, very important business as well, but aside from the cruise ships?
So we're very lucky that we have constant bus tours as well that come through to us every year. We have our Irish visitors as well, which is so important because this is our history and we need to keep this history alive. People need to know about the flying boats and the fact that Foynes was the first international airport in Ireland. We have our walk-ins, so people will be driving past, they'll see the tail end of the plane and they'll go, hang on, what's in there? And they'll come in and they're blown away because they're not expecting expecting that in a small little village in West Limerick. We have people coming from all over the world. Last year we had a lot of tours from Switzerland, and they were coming in, but they were coming in for an Irish coffee, to hear the story of the Irish coffee, to see it being made, and to get back on the bus again and move away.
A lot of Americans?
A lot of Americans. Over the last couple of years as well, we've had a lot of the Irish coming to us as well, which I think is so important. Europeans last year were very high on our list as well, and Australians are getting there as well.
This is probably, it is busy here today, but probably a quiet day in the overall scheme of things. So come into June, July, August.
You could be talking anything up to about 6 tour buses a day, which we're very fortunate for. And then we have to take into consideration that the children are off school, parents are coming out for day trips, and then you have and even people coming in camper vans. They're just driving around the wild Atlantic way, and they'll stop in Foynes, and they'll come in, they'll do the tour, they'll have an Irish coffee, and they'll be on their way again.
And they've learned the story of Shannon Airport Foynes almost accidentally. They mightn't have known before they came in here.
Absolutely, and a lot of people, that is the case. Now we do have aviation enthusiasts and ex-airline staff that will come through, and they love it just as much as anybody else. But the local person walking in off the street, they'll kind of go, hang on a minute, and they get all that information when they're coming through here. And it is keeping the story of the flying boats alive, and the fantastic work that Brendan O'Regan did and Joe Sheridan did while they were here.
A lot of work has been carried out in recent years at the Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum. A conference centre and luxurious cinema have been added, while the gift shop has also been redeveloped. Despite some confusion, Shannon Airport Foynes, as it was known, was the birthplace of the world-famous Irish coffee, and this story is also told here. The invaluable contribution of the late Hollywood actress and singer Maureen O'Hara to the development and success of the museum is remembered fondly in Foynes. Margaret O'Shaughnessy is director of Foynes Flying Boat and Maritime Museum and was a close personal friend of the Quiet Man star for several decades.
I always said we'd try and see that she'd never be forgotten, and that was a promise I made when she was very ill. After she died in 2015, we left things settled for a while, and I was at home one night, and her grandson Conor Bowe, because her daughter unfortunately died 6-7 months after her, and she only had one daughter, one grandson, and Conor Bowe is in the States, and he called me. I remember distinctly, I was getting into bed, the time difference, and he lives in Boise in Idaho, where she died, and he said, "Hi Megs, how are you?" and blah 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 blah. He said, "Come here, would you take a few grand's things?" That's what he said to me. "Oh yeah," I said, "have you a few dresses or something?" He said, "Yeah, come over." So myself and my sidekick Mary Rohan, my lifelong friend, we got flights and off we went. I went to Boise, and next thing he took us down into warehouses, and I mean warehouses, and there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clothing, of memorabilia, of everything. And oh my God, we spent a few days locked into that warehouse, and will we take this, will we take that? And Mary was the climber. I wouldn't climb anywhere, but Mary'd climb anywhere. And we just started putting stuff together, and we started with that. And I got 40-foot containers on board the ship. No, the first ones came by air. And another great Clareman helped me, based in Shannon. We got that in. And then he rang again and said, "Come back, there's more." And the Oscar came, and then the trap from the Quiet Man and all of that. And we brought them by ship because it was too expensive. I think 2 40-foot containers. I have something like 500 or 600 clothing items. I have scripts, I have contracts, I have her will. I have love letters from Charlie Blair, love letters from John Ford, written on Ashford Castle headed paper. Like, we could have done a massive museum in her, but like we just did, as you saw, the one wing and put out. But we'll change that now, and we'll put out other stuff again.
A big attraction in itself, not
well,
just
you know, if the men love the aviation, the
yes.
women love the clothes and the Maureen O'Hara bit and all that, you know. But you see, there's a few things about her people don't know. Outside of being a film star, she went for American citizenship, and she was looking for to be a dual citizen. And when she did all the things, and that time you had to sit a course, everything. But anyway, she went in and she was filmed the last forum, and we have the forums, and it came down along previous nationality. And when she went up and down it, Ireland wasn't on it. And she went out, she said, "You gave me the wrong forum, you know, Ireland." Oh, they said, "No, that's the form, fill it, or you can't go up before the judge and get it." And she said, I can't swear allegiance to a country I'm not from. And they said, tick the UK, or Britain, I suppose it was. And she's...
No way.
No way, she was a Republican to the end. So she actually went to Washington and went before judges and everything. And she was the woman that got Ireland recognised as an independent country for the future. And I have those papers.
For citizenship.
For citizenship. That was one thing. And the other thing, she became the first woman president of a commercial airline when Charlie Blair was killed on his flight. She took over. Now, she was very important that she said to me, I was voted by the shareholders to be president of a commercial airline. She was the first woman to do that. So she's a lot of things. She was very good at promoting Ireland all her life.
I come back here because it's to help and honour the Foynes Aviation Museum, and because the lady that is really the force back of it, Margaret O'Shaughnessy, is an old devil that pesters you to death. And if you said no to Margaret, don't go sleep at night.
The story of the Irish coffee, there is confusion about where it came about, how it came about. It came about here in Foynes, Shannon Airport Foynes.
Yes, it came about because a flight left here on the 14th of October, American export flight, going to New York. And always these flights depended on weather. They always went at night time for security, right? And the pilot would make a decision, was it okay to keep going or whatever, and he made a decision. The weather was too bad, he'd turn to Foynes, come back, and he'd await better weather. So my grandfather would have gone out and called in the restaurant staff and all that to prepare food and drink. And we have so many testimonials to this, like Brendan O'Regan was the boss here. And when they came in and they said, give them drinks and coffees and all, Sheridan put whiskey in the coffee and he gave it. And they said, genuinely, gee, it is fabulous. What have you in it? What coffee did you use? And he said, Irish. Joking. Absolutely joking. But a few days later, he put it in a glass and he went down and this is Brendan O'Regan's testimony. I think we all know how honest he was. And he's knocked on the door to Brendan and he said, boss, how about this for eye appeal? Because Brendan constantly told him, always, everything has to have eye appeal. You know, the food you serve, everything has to have eye appeal. And that's what Sheridan, and Brendan said to him, that's a genius, chef. And that's how the whole Irish coffee. He's buried in Oakland Cemetery. I'm in touch with his family. They've been here. I tell him where the grave is. Because he went, as you know, to America, to the Buena Vista, and we work hand in hand with the Buena Vista, and he's buried. And Brendan got a family called Stavely's, friends of his, in San Francisco, to put a new plaque many years ago on his grave, which says, here lies the inventor of the world's most famous drink, Joe Sheridan. And that's what's on his grave. And Brendan gave me a portrait of him and wrote in the back of it the whole thing again. So it was here. But that's where confusion, because it's called Shannon Airport at the time.
You've also named your restaurant after the great Brendan O'Regan?
Absolutely. I'd name anything after. I adore the man. I think he was the greatest visionary and the greatest Irishman we've had in a long time. Lemass would not be as great, but would be up there as well. But Brendan, he was just something else. Look at all he did for everything. For Clare, you know, for the duty free, all of that, you know, I mean, he was an extraordinary man.
The work you've done here, Margaret, over the past few years, the contractors finishing up on site this week. Did you ever think back in 88, 89 that you'd be here and it would be as big as it is now?
Well, Pat, I'm 73 this year. I'm here 38, 39 years. I had no idea. It consumed my life. And my husband's, because everything was museum first. So we've been very careful. You know, Brendan used to say this as well, you know, when we pass on, which we all can do it any day, it's nice to leave some good behind. And hopefully I've left some good in preserving the history. That's all I ever wanted. It's not for the glory, it's not for the money, I can tell you. It's certainly not for any of that. But you know, we've given great breaks to a lot of staff here over the years, and students, we've given them their start. And it's a whole village thing, you know. But the one thing I will say is Foynes and the story of Foynes is probably better known in America than it is inside Limerick City. Do you know, that kind of a way? We never appreciate what's on our doorstep. We always look further. And that's the only thing I say to people. Do come, learn the history, if for no other reason that you know where it all began.
He used to fly the seaplanes in here to Foynes, and as it happened, he flew the last commercial seaplane out of Foynes and closed Foynes as a seaplane base. He flew to New York, closed Foynes, dipped his plane as he went down the street to say goodbye, and had some sleep in New York, and he flew the first land plane from the United States to land in Shannon Airport. And there's a monument at Shannon Airport to him because of that.